Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does that nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan. It's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you head to catalystsale.com/game, you can find out more information. My catalyst today is Darryl Praill. Darryl has been on the podcast before. He's the Chief Marketing Officer at Agoropulse and a friend. Darryl, it is always good to see you. It's good to have you back on the podcast. I was just on yours recently. I say just, and I shouldn't say that because what that's going to do is it's going to time bound this. And the reality is I was recently. However, once this goes live, it won't be recent anymore. And we were just talking about the wind beneath my wings.
Yes, we were. I was sharing. So we were in the green room for those who were just listening before he hit record. And I don't know how we got there, but we go in crazy directions. I was talking about wind beneath my wings. And the story I was sharing, I know what it was. I was telling my fine host here, Mr. Mike Simmons, that he is in fact, with his talent and his skills and his ability and love of training and imparting wisdom, he was the wind beneath my wings. That's where we got from. And then I was sharing a little tangent, which I do a lot. Sorry, folks, get used to it. Is that was our wedding song, my wife and I, our first song 33 years ago. And the whole story there about is the importance of communication and setting expectations, a sales lesson on your wedding day, which is we went to the DJ at the time when we were booking them and we said, we want this to be your song. And they're like, yep. Now at the time, Bette Midler had just released The Wind Beneath My Wings, but we had been dating much longer than that. And we said, we don't want the Bette Midler version. We want the Lee Greenwood. Now, if you don't know who Lee Greenwood is, you probably heard him. Was it I'm Proud to Be an American? That's a song you probably hear played at stadiums all the time. That's Lee Greenwood. And we said, we want that version. You have it. Yeah, I got it. I'm serious, because Bette's hot right now. Like if you've got it, great. But if not, we'll give it to you. We have it. No, we got it. You sure you got it? We got it. Okay, because we can give. No, we got it. Great. Go to the wedding day. The DJ comes up to us. Yeah, you got to do your first dance. Okay, you ready? Yeah, we're ready. Oh, by the way, yeah, I couldn't find the Lee Greenwood version. So we're going to go with Bette Midler. And we were like, what? And we were pissed. We were pissed on our wedding day.
Hold on, Darryl. So you mean you didn't just hand your phone and connect to Spotify and give
No. I was probably 4 years away from getting my first ever phone, which was a brick and a half, let me tell you. But man, it was like 3 watts and I could get a signal from 40 miles away. It was brilliant. And so here's the takeaway of this little wonderful sales story was we were having this exchange. I was doing a discovery with them. They'd set my expectations up. Now, the rest of the night, he might have been the world's best DJ. I don't recall. But you know what I recall? I recall that he did not meet my expectations, even though I was very clear about it. And here I am 30 plus years later, still bitter and still talking about it. And too many sales reps fall into that trap. That's the wind beneath my wings story, Mike. There we go. Sales from wedding days and pop culture of the 80s.
Cross revenue teams. We do this.
Yes. Like revenue teams. You're right. You're spot on.
Imagine a scenario where I see an ad, I click on the ad, and then I go to the website and the website's completely different. It doesn't align with what has that ever happened?
No. Or imagine you see the ad, you do the website search, you see the ad, you're in, and then it says call for more information, and you call, and when you're talking to a live representative of the company, the conversation is 180 degrees opposite of what you thought you had just consumed. Has that ever happened, Mike?
I can't even imagine a scenario where something like that would happen. Or imagine a scenario where you have that conversation. The DJ says that they'll have the wind beneath the wings, or the person who's selling the service says that. And then the DJ shows up and the DJ has a whole nother set of music.
Yes. And is oblivious. He had no idea. I've never seen a situation where I've been onboarded by the DJ and didn't get the conversation from the sales rep. Never, ever seen that. But as I talk out loud here, Mike, it almost feels like we're talking about like a customer journey of some sort, a value chain that is broken. But, what do I know?
Why do we complicate this stuff? Like, that story is pretty simple. There are everybody who's listening is I've been there. It could be, I go to the restaurant. I'm going to, Lolo's chicken and waffles, and I'm expecting the most amazing chicken, and I get in and they're out of chicken.
Yeah.
We've experienced these things where these challenges come up, yet we continue to trip over ourselves because we overcomplicate so much of this. Why do we overcomplicate it?
Wow, okay. How much time have we got? Is there a couch involved?
There's always
I think a lot of it. I need my psych couch so I can just give, and this can be therapy and counseling sessions at the same time. I think a lot of it is just human pride, ego, and arrogance, in all honesty, right? So if I were to pull that apart a little bit, one of the areas I've seen, and I want to preface what I'm about to say, saying I am not judging any one particular individual here. I'm just using real world experiences that I've endured, where marketing's out there sending a certain message, and they've passed it along to sales. But then there's always that rep or two or three who knows better. And what marketing's saying is crap. That's not what I'm hearing on the call. And I'm going to ignore everything you just said because I'm a closer. My numbers speak for themselves. And just, get behind me, boys and girls, because I have entered the room. And here's the irony, okay? That rep may be right. But the rep literally makes no effort to engage marketing, get them on some calls, listen to some recordings, have them interview one of their customers or two or three to educate them, because, the great thing about, tides lift all boats, high tides lift all boats. That rep could be the high tide, and it's educating marketing, which then changes the message. And then all the reps benefit from, including the company. Life is good. We all have job security, but they don't do that. And it's because they want to be big man on campus, or they want to be the top dog, at least in their mind, or they're arrogant and they think you should know better and you're all stupid, and they have a high opinion of themselves. I could go on. That's one example. It works all the way down the food chain, by the way. Success believes they're implementing something else, even though sales is sold A. Success believes they're implementing B, and they don't listen. And they're adamant that they're right. And when that happens, as much as I want to slap all those people, and for equality, marketing screws up too.
I just wanted to confirm, you're Canadian and you said you're going to slap somebody.
I'm going to slap somebody. It's only because I was listening this morning when I was getting ready. I was listening to a replay of Rachel Maddow on the podcast, which is, I guess, her television show, which I do periodically. And they were telling a story about how Trump, when he was early on in his maybe 2016 looking to run for president, he was recently being, I guess, what do you call that? When the lawyers have a conversation, sit down, chat with them to understand, and basically an interrogation. He had threatened that if anybody threw fruit at him, tomatoes, they should be roughed up. They should be dealt with. They should be beat up. I'm paraphrasing. Don't quote me in that one. That's the gist. And he will cover the legal bills. And she might have been mocking him for his aversion to soft fruits. So yes, I said slap somebody because I was inspired by that colorful conversation that I just heard minutes ago. So I am a product. Like everybody else, I'm a consumer who could be influenced by the messaging I hear.
I thought you were going to say you're a product of your environment. So
no, because I'm Canadian. We do have our own mini Trumps, but we don't have the real deal. So and it's a little different up here. I will say, now we're off on a tangent. I will say, because what people don't understand is, Canada, because people do a couple things. The other thing, Canada is mini USA, which is reasonable. We sound the same. We look the same. We're your neighbors. It's one big piece of land. I get it. We're not. Or they don't even know Canada's. They don't even know where the border is. It's one of the two things. And here's the thing. We're always like 3, 4, 5 years behind you folks, and that it's got some downsides. Like when your economy is booming, we have to play catch up, right? So you guys get all the hot movies and music first. Like Justin Bieber, even though he's Canadian, he's just come to Canada. I'm being a little cheeky, but we're always a little behind. But similarly, we watch things like politics and we're like, Well, that's interesting. And then we're like, then we grab a drink, we get a lawn chair, we sit down, we're in our garage, obviously looking at the street. The street is the symbolic USA. And then we're grabbing a cigarette and we're just puffing and we're watching the show. And then the nice thing for us is that we then turn around and say, is that what we want here? And then we have this long Discord and we do something similar but different, not quite as extreme usually. Ironically, all of this is a metaphor for what you should be doing in sales. You should be observing what others are doing and not make that mistake. If you want Mike, I've got a few bees in my bonnet that I've recently observed with a sales rep team that a company I've just joined with. I'm not going to name names, Agoropulse, and you can check it out. And I can tell you what I've observed. I've seen over and over again.
I'm shocked. I don't understand.
I know. I know.
What do you mean you've seen it over and over again? You mean this movie has been not only watched before, but created before? The book has been written before and read before. So like there are some similarities in what you might be seeing inside a new organization relative to the challenges that we're working to address.
It's Groundhog Day, brother. It's Groundhog Day. Awesome. It's Groundhog Day. So I'll throw, if you want, I mean, you're the host.
Let's dive in.
But
Let's dive in.
Okay, I'll throw some out there. We can discuss it. And for our wonderful captive audience who are rolling their eyes and fast forwarding, just fast forward 10 minutes and maybe we pass the first one. So this is what I've noticed. So I recently changed employers, as I mentioned. And I went from being chief revenue officer at VanillaSoft to being chief marketing officer at this new company. Although, for context, just so you all know, I haven't left the sales game entirely. The SDR team does report to me, but we'll come back. Because of my sales experience, they have asked me to, contribute my input into their sales efforts. And I have a smashing, brilliant relationship with the head of sales. Jenny Brennan, nothing but the best. She's an incredible woman. So we get along quite well. And everything I'm going to tell you, she's fully aware of and working on. So this is what I've observed. And then I said, I've seen it over and over again. Number one, sales reps skim, non-frickin' stop. They skim the communications from internal stakeholders like me. If they got an email from me, they'll skim it. They skim what customers or prospects send to them, so they don't fully understand what's going on or what's expected of them. They skim their own creative writing routines and don't see how bad they are. So that's a rule. Issue number one, skimming is epidemic.
But Darryl,
number two,
we're busy. Like we've got lots of things to do. We got to move from where we are right now to the next one because I got to keep closing. So if I just keep moving through this stuff quickly, I can start closing more.
It's true. Or I got a big to-do list to get done. I got to get to get done. I don't know. To do done? My daughter used to work for a construction firm called To Do Done. I thought it was the best name ever. Anyway, so that's number one. And for all you listening, whether you're in sales or leadership, you're an entrepreneur, you're a technical founder, whatever it might be, this behavior, if you don't change it right away, is going to bite you in the ass in so many ways. Like my story, Wind Beneath My Wings. They were really kind of skimming what I wanted because they wanted to move on to the conversation. Number two, on a related note, they genuinely, they fervently believe that they are the best at everything they do. And where I see this manifest itself, whether it be sales skills, I see this most recently in a lot of messaging and sales. So I will see them write sequences and I will be the parent figure. Mike, tell me if you can relate to this at all, where your kid is messed up and you want them to realize it on their own. So you're trying to lead them to the realization that what they did was wrong without being that parent that's all judgmental and quick to anger and quick to judge. And you say something like, so you feeling good about this sequence? Yeah. Like, okay, so you think you got enough touches? Yeah. You think this resonates with the target persona? Uh-huh. Do you know who the target persona is? Oh yeah. It's whatever. C-level officer. Do you know does this have the language of our ideal customer profile that we're targeting? Oh yeah. So you think the person, C-level officer, you're targeting, this will connect. Yep. You're positive. Yep. Okay. Fair enough. And I see this over and over again. And then this is what we do, folks. This is what we do. I don't know. I might be able to hear from you. Then I get together with the head of sales and maybe a few other senior leaders in the company, because we're having maybe a leadership meeting. And I say, I want to bring this up. And of course I have permission from the head of sales first. I would never do that. but because this is a good lesson for the whole leadership team to understand. Because how we started off discussing, Mike, about every different group being, there's the value chain is broken, the customer journey is broken. It's important that every team in the organization understands the importance of this experience. And I say, guys, this subject line, I said, is anybody else, like, for example, the subject line I was critiquing recently was Agora. I would be like, Microsoft, less than greater than sign, Agoropulse. I said, does anybody else get this subject line 42 times a day in different vendors? So this is the latest and greatest template.
I want to ask you, I've got to ask you a question just to.
Yeah.
Wait, you mean you have a senior leadership team inside your organization that might have the same roles of some of the people that you're reaching out to, and you actually ask them a question about their experience? I wish I could be more, how do I put this? Intentional, trying to suggest that we're really forward thinking. What I'm trying to make sure is that we have alignment on our message across all of the organization. And then while they're there, I know every one of those people own budget. Sure. So why not pick their brain and see how they would react to this, right? Right.
So I'm like, because everybody else got 42 versions, and I'm like, yeah, across the board. And I said, okay, and I turned to the head of sales and said, Jenny, I said, your sales rep thinks that this is a kick-ass subject. I said, when we see that subject line, it screams sequence because we've got it so many times. Then I go in and I'm like reading I said, let's just walk through the text. And he had, 4 lines, maybe 4 paragraphs of 1 sentence each, maybe 1 or 2 sentences each. And I was starting the first sentence and I'm like, this first sentence, the first sentence, kids, is the most important sentence. All right. So
Darryl, why is the first sentence the most important sentence?
Because that's what makes you decide to read the rest of the email or hit delete. In fact, there's a pecking order. I delete 80% of my emails without ever opening them because of the subject line.
Right. Yep.
Right. All right. And then I had to make a decision. If it provokes me enough, I open it. And if that first line, I think, suggests it might help me in my daily tasks, then I'll read on. But if it screams sales, screams a feature dump, because I don't live in features, I live in pains and issues, then I delete it. So it's kind of like sales. Remember, sales, a properly run sales process is never to close the deal on the first call. You're not trying to hit a home run. You're trying to hit single. You're always trying to get that next meeting, or the next phase. And yet too many reps try to hit the home run out of the park. They try to do that on the LinkedIn connection request. It's where it starts. So you have to understand the purpose of this email is simply to engage me enough, go to the next step, which might be a live conversation, or at least a dialogue on email or social or whatever it might be. That's the next step. So I'm reading this. I said, does that first one resonate? And of course, the answer is always no. And I've sit down and I say, okay, let's just talk about this. What do we have? We have so many. I want to go ADA, awareness, A, awareness, I, interest. I could carry on. You get the idea, right? You want to go BAP, before, after, pain, process? I don't remember. Anyway, you get the idea. You want to go TTTT, trigger, third party, before, action. Yeah, anyway, you get the idea. So it's all about the first sentence should either trigger you or it should make you want to act because it's emotional, all right? Or it's talking about your life before, which is your situation right now, which is right. Emotional to you, right? Sure. That's the first. Every formula pretty much says the same thing.
Yeah.
You see the first line, it's like, Agoropulse is the world's best social media marketing solution. I'm making that up. Insert any company name you want. You haven't triggered me, and it just screams sales pitch. And so we go on. When we went through this whole sequence process, and everybody's like shaking their head. And then what I would do is you would read it, and you'd realize that none of the paragraphs bridge properly. And by the second paragraph, the third paragraph, I'm going, what the hell is he talking about? Because he's talking about shit he's never talked about before. And then you go in the sequence, and you read the second email, the third email, the fourth email, that they're talking about crap. Like I saw one email where it said, hey, we've got some great case studies. That's what we said. We've got some great case studies to back up our claim. That's what it was. The next email said, so what'd you think of those case studies? So then I go back to the previous email and I'm like, is there an attachment? Am I missing something? Is there a link? No, all it said was, we have some, which I'm inferring I'm supposed to say, great, can you send them to me? But there was no offer there. No, let me know if you want them, or, hey, I've attached them. Just, we have some. And then the next email was, what'd you think of those? And I'm like, did nobody freaking look at this and see that there's no continuity?
Well, you said they skim.
That's an example.
They skim.
They skim. That's how they ties back. They're skimming, they write their sequences and then they skim when they proof, if they proof their messages. Now, here's what I will say to all the founders out there, all the sales leaders. What I'm just talking about, yeah, it's a sales problem, but more worrisome for you is this is a branding problem. This is what's going to cause people to say your company is a joke. And I am never going to trust my discretionary budget spend on you folks because I simply don't trust you. So number one, they skim. Number two, they think they're awesome at messaging and sequences and they really have no idea. Oh, I forgot to mention the last part of that. The sequence I was reading had 3 touches. And I'm like, boys and girls, it's been out there for years. Like, statistically, you need 9 to 12 touches, depending on the stats and study you read, for people finally go, fine, I'll respond. You've worn me down. Now, I'm not saying you need to do 9 or 12, but here's what I will say. It's very easy for every single buyer to reject and ignore 3 touches, and then they've gone. So again, that's an example of the rep. Finally, lastly, really big, these reps have no idea how to communicate with their bosses. They don't know how to communicate up. And what I keep on trying to coach these fellows is if you want to be successful, you have to be vulnerable, transparent, forthright with me. It's not a sign of weakness. But again, we go back to how we began about arrogance and pride. They don't want to communicate it up. And the reality is that we can't give you the skills or the talent or the processes or the tools necessary. And we want to, if you don't tell us what's going on. Now, yes, it is incumbent upon the sales leadership, poke and prod and do their best Columbo to look for clues on what's going on. However, it is a two-way street. You communicate down and you communicate up. And teaching them to have that self-awareness, the mindset, the confidence that it is a safe place because we're all trying to achieve the same thing and I'm walking alongside of you is something we have to start in the interview process to make sure that's what we're hiring. So again, if you're a founder, yes, I understand we all want to hire that rep who carries a big stick, has a lot of swagger, but just understand that could also mean they have a lot of bad habits and that's going to kick you in the ass because after 6 to 9 months or a year, you're going to say, I just wasted a lot of money and a lot of time and opportunity because I was enamored by your big stick. But at the end of the day, you use that stick and you would always swing and miss. So that was a mistake. So hire wisely, hire for those skills, make sure they don't skim, make sure they're open to studying best practices and applying them as opposed to thinking they know what's going on. So a little bit of humility goes a long ways. That's what I'm seeing over and over again. I've talked way too much, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, it's good stuff. And it's funny to see it happen over and over again. And yeah. I say it's funny because most of us as leaders think that we're the only ones that are dealing with this challenge right now. Or as people, we think we're the only ones that are dealing with this challenge right now because we look at everything else that's out there and they'll talk about all the growth and they'll talk about all of the funding and they'll talk about all of the cool things that are going on. So we get this view of, hey, let's present a really good picture. We know when we get into the detail inside our organizations that things are not as perfect as we'd like them to be. If they were, we'd be growing at a faster clip. People would be more happy with the work that they're doing. People wouldn't leave roles. So we've got this disconnect between what's the reality and what is the perception or perspective and perception that's being put out there. And as we go through this arc of discussion, both from wind beneath my wings to all boats rising to understanding customer journey to being really clear about what happens when we go too fast rather than worrying about speed to impact. We run around and we go really, really fast and not get back into, hey, we're actually trying to help people. We can make this simpler. We can get people really focused on that next logical step. We lose track of what's happening inside our organization. So I think this is all really, really important for people to go back and say, do I have a moving too fast problem? Do I have a lack of reality over confidence, lack of perspective problem? Do I have a communication problem inside my organization where there's a lack of transparency both up and down inside the organization? If you have any of those 3 problems, solve for one of them first. Don't try to solve for every one of them, because if you try to solve for every one of them, you'll be like every other organization that will continue to have these problems over and over and over again.
I want to bring to everybody's attention what just happened here, and you were probably completely unaware. Mike summarized everything I just said. He recapped it all. And then he bridged from that into the takeaways. And then he bridged from that into the proposed next step. Focus on one thing first, because if you don't, this is what happens. That is what every single rep should be doing, because I just gave I rambled like any discovery session. He recapped it, laid it back to me. I feel heard. He then says, these are the symptoms. I connect it and relate it and says, he understands me. He then said, this is what you should do next. I trust him and I want him to fix it for me. How can you help me? Because you know what you're doing? You're fixing my pain. That is discovery 101. That's what makes Mike so good what he does. And brother, you're 1,000% right. I had that conversation with my head of sales the other day. She was pulling her hair out because you see all the issues. And I said to her, I said, what are the 3 things you're going to fix this quarter? I said, because if you give your, in this case, her sales manager more than that, they will fail. And the chances of them doing all 3 are still highly unlikely. So prioritize them. Now, you still know you have these other problems and you still view those as important. Who else can you assign that to? Maybe somebody in sales enablement, maybe somebody in marketing, maybe an outside agency. I don't know. And now finally, I brought it back to her and I'm saying, now, what are the expectations on your sales reps? Because if they spend all this time learning, then they're not going to have any time to actually be doing. So, you got to understand, you got to temper it. And then the final piece of wisdom I said was, we go back full circle. You need to communicate up to the senior leadership saying, this is my list of house cleaning I need to do. These are the 3 I'm focusing on right now. This is my prioritized list. This is the timeline. This is, additional resources, budget I'm investing. I'll keep you in the loop, monthly to let you know how I'm progressing on that one. If I see any warning signs, I'll let you know. And I'll also come with a plan B. And they all go, okay. Because now they feel like they have their shit together and they can move on because, sales is. If you're a founder or a leader, that's what you should expect from your sales leadership, by the way. If you're a small shop, then that's how you got to handle it yourself. Just so you know, just as exactly as he said, you got to do 2 things. You got to just kind of pick the top ones because you can't boil the ocean. You got to say, this is what's most important. And then you got to learn that incredible skill that Mike Simmons just demonstrated and apply that in every one of your calls. Well done, brother.
Am I hired?
You're hired.
That's cool.
You are hired.
There we go.
I love it. It's funny because I had somebody do that to me recently, right? They were like, because I do this on my podcast, sure. They'll think about it because some speakers are less specific. Some guests are less specific with their advice than others. They talk at a 50,000 square foot level. Now, you or I, because of our tenure, understand what they're trying to say, but the general audience doesn't always pick up on it. So I'll do what you did, but I'm doing it just so I want to make sure that my guests' talking points are truly understood by someone with less experience. And I'll say, so what you just heard them say, they said X. What that really means is Y, right? And so that's the recap. And I've had somebody play back to me. They're like, you must be awesome in discovery. And I'm like, why do you say that? Because you recap everything all the time. And when you're done recapping it, I just go, oh, okay, yeah, that's it. Because the guy just talked for 10 minutes, but you just recapped it in 20 seconds. And you're like, I got it. Yeah, we're aligned. So,
and you've done that to me on your podcast where I would joke.
That's because you just ramble and you're meaningless.
I am meaningless. I wish that I could bring you along with me. And so the story here, I think the important thing for people to take away from this part of the conversation, this is why you should not sell alone. This is why you should go in and work with other members of the team so that you get these other perspectives, because sometimes it happens when rather than a discovery call, it turns into a giant pitch. People all of a sudden hear the one thing that they wanted to hear. And they're like, oh, I've got something for that. Let me tell you all of the cool things I have for that, rather than going in a little bit deeper and saying, okay, so let me just make sure I understand. It is the Lee Greenwood, Greenwood version of Wind Beneath My Wings, the one that was recorded in such and such a time. And then on your side, you'd say, oh yeah, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. And now you've got a higher level of confidence because they ask a question to validate understanding rather than just nodding and saying, oh, we can do that. actually, we have case studies. And then a couple of weeks later, what'd you think of those case studies? Wait, what case studies?
Oh, so I want to jump on that. I mean, so we're kind of segued into disco, but what Mike just said was brilliant. So this is the other, and he alluded to it. This is a bad mistake I see happen all the time, where especially when you're a less experienced, SDR or AE, or maybe you're a technical founder, and sales is something you do out of necessity, not because it's your gift or your gift or your passion. You're trying to generate some freaking money so you get enough revenue to hire somebody else. We tend to get very excited when somebody says, I have this pain, because we instantly go, oh, I can help there, because we're always looking for a point of connection. The best people do discovery take great notes, and they hide, maybe they star or asterisk those little areas so they can circle back on. Maybe they do talk about feature A, talk about feature B here, but they listen to the whole conversation. And then they ask why, like 2 or 3 times, and each of the key salient points to get down further and further and further. In other words, I have a sore shoulder. Okay, he has a sore shoulder. When you ask why, well, because I woke up with it bad. Well, why did you wake up with it bad? Well, it's probably because I was out, playing tennis the other night. What happened when you were playing tennis? Well, I got hit by the ball in my shoulder, and then I fell on it. Okay, so your symptom is you probably need better running shoes, so you can get the hell out of the way. Then, the fact I should give you have a sore shoulder, it's another reason. That's the whole, you ask why, after you're done asking all those questions. And then once that's all done, here's the bridge. You do what Mike said. All right. So what I heard you say was the ding, recap. I want to focus on just those key areas. So that's okay with you. Yep. And I want to introduce you to some of the features or capabilities that we have that will address that. Now is now a good time? Because if you want, we can reconvene, and I can actually, set up a custom version of our solution to not only tell you about it, but to show you. And then you can tell me if that looks like it would be working for you, or if you want a different user interface, whatever it might be, right? And that's the process. It's very structured and very intentional. I always say this, Mike, when I met my wife, I had to make sure I said this right, because we don't want a not safe for work clip. I had to fight my young man impulses and say, hi, would you like to sleep with me? I had to fight that. And instead I said, there's a process. I have to woo her. I have to earn her trust, and maybe one day there will be a reward at the end of the process, right? So too many people go to that, hey, will you sleep with me? And in fact, it's a process. Just like when you're trying to, convince a significant one in your life to hang out with you.
And we've got to smile about this stuff. And the reason we have to smile about this stuff is because we all do it. We all get excited. We all either want to help someone solve a problem or feel like we've got a live one, or whatever it is. We can quickly fall into the trap of presenting feature benefits because we heard something that aligned with it. And we think, okay, well, now I can help you solve it, before we've taken the time to build that level of trust and really understand the story. Because in the example Darryl just shared, the shoulder could be an overuse injury, which is something completely different than an impact injury.
Brilliant.
And the approach that we're going to take to solve for either of those is going to be slightly different. But if we're out there just pitching because we know that you've got a shoulder injury, then we're going to lose some things. So give your team a bit of grace here and understand that they get really excited about it. It's human nature. We get excited. We want to help. So create those opportunities for people to say, you know what? It's actually pretty interesting if I take a reflective listening approach to the situation, and I am not so focused on getting to the solution today. I know that there's going to be this progression as we build a level of trust, and they go through. And I think we forget about this as sales professionals, as revenue professionals inside organization. The customer actually has a vote. They have their own process. So we talk about all the process crap that we've got to work through on our end. They actually have their thing that they have to work through on their end. And if they're going to bring you in front of somebody else, do you think they want to bring you in front of somebody else if you treat them poorly in that situation and you skim through the discussion and swing your big stick and miss on communication? No, because you won't be an accurate representation, reflection of their judgment on the type of people that they introduce into their organization. You can do a heck of a lot better if you operate with a high level of intention.
And here's the perfect example to drive this home. I can give you a whole bunch of ingredients and I can say, make something with it. Or I can say, here's the ingredients and here's the recipe. And this is what you do, when you do it, for how long, and what the next step is. Which approach do you think is going to result in the more edible, palatable outcome, right? Which is what we all want. I'm confident it's when I follow the process, the recipe. And the irony is nobody ever objects to following a recipe. Now, once they're comfortable, they may want to go freestyling it. And the irony is that's okay too. If you're a rep who has mastered the process and the messaging and the value prop and everything else, if you want to just start doing some freestyling now, maybe A/B test some nuances, knock yourself out. But you're not ready to freestyle until you've got the basics, and the basic is a process. And that's exactly what Mike is talking about. And that's why I get so frustrated when I go back and I'm talking about, I'm seeing some core fundamental issues at every single organization I've ever been at. Maybe it's generational. Maybe it's just youth. Maybe it's a lack of direction or leadership. I'm seeing skimming. I'm seeing an incredible arrogance and pride that they think that they're awesome at messaging when the reality is what they're really doing is awesome at copying and pasting somebody else's template. And then I'm seeing an inability to communicate. And these are all things you need to fix because it's essential if you're going to have a dialogue with a prospect that you hope will result in a closed deal.
This happens at every aspect of the chain. Every aspect of the chain. We talked about it a little bit earlier about on the marketing side, then we got into the sales side. And then if you get into the success side, it happens there. It happens in communication. It also happens in proposals. I have seen so many proposals that have been reused where you put the wrong customer name in because your find replace missed on one.
Missed one.
And it just, all it does is it just makes you want to smack your head. So
yes.
Darryl, you're inside a new organization. You've gone through kind of this onboarding process and getting to know folks. One of the things that you had shared, and you shared it in the conversation after we turned the mics on as well, is that the SDRs are in your side of the organization rather than in the head of sales segment.
Correct.
Why have you gone that route?
Well, I think it's probably twofold. Like part of the reason they went that route, it was discussed right in the interview process because it wasn't that way until I joined. So like part of it was because of my experience, they felt comfortable with it. And they actually thought I could maybe give them more love. But B, the CEO had come to the opinion, and I agree with the CEO, that the function of the SDR is effectively to qualify. And marketing is already qualified, right? We have our own, our marketing nurtures, we're scoring you. We're using a lot of inputs with intent signals and everything else. And so we hit a certain definition and we say that's MQL, that's marketing qualified lead.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean that it's sales qualified lead. So we hand it over to another party who just continues the qualification process.
Yep.
That was the first part. Second part was the SDR is that first point of contact. And we thought, kind of like going back what we talked about here with the whole idea of sequences and messaging, having them in the marketing organization where they have access to professional copywriters, professional conversion rate optimization experts, professional messaging people, having them, also having them much closer to the content creation and to know what's going on and what's available. So they have input in influencing what content is created for those sales calls was going to result in a much more seamless process and from the customer journey, that value chain we talked about, as well as developing the skills they will need as they eventually mature into an AE. So this is like the minor leagues, and we train them on the marketing, and then we send them up to the majors. And the reason is because I will contend that most sales reps these days are mini marketers. They are aware of their open rates. They should be aware, and most of them are on their subject lines, their email formats. They are aware of the need for a personal brand. Whether they do it's another story, but they're aware of it. They are aware that it's multi-channel, one of them being social. All right. So all of those are historically marketing skills and attributes. So let's teach it to them now, and then we can promote them as they get the experience. That's the thought process.
I think it's like, and there was a time and a place where I would have said this role belongs inside the sales team. And one of the primary reasons my thinking has evolved around this is one, your thinking should always evolve. But one of the primary reasons that my thinking has evolved is the progression is not necessarily from SDR to AE. That's an easy progression. It's a simple one. It's one where people can connect the dots. But a lot of times inside these organizations, especially when you create a high level of specialization in the organization, that SDR role might actually be better as a demand gen marketer inside the organization because that's what they want to do. And now they've got personal contact with people and context so that they can be better at that. Or they may want to go into customer success inside the organization, or they may want to go into account management. And I think if we start looking at our organizations as this ecosystem, rather than start here, you move to this one, and then you move to this one, you can create a much better working environment for folks. So it's just like solution fit is important with customer. Having that group inside the right area of the organization is more important than historic structure type stuff. So I think it's really cool that the SDR team is on the marketing side. I think of it as a demand gen function. And that's why I would actually lean heavily toward doing that now, but I'm also comfortable with it being anywhere because they've got to be the right fit with the right leadership and the right capabilities and the right thing for the business. One size does not fit all. We deal with the same broader challenges, but one size does not fit all.
It's funny because when SDRs usually react like, I don't want to be part of marketing. They have this default trigger behavior, right? And when I explained to them exactly what you just said, I said, listen, if you're going to sales team, your path is straightforward. You go from SDR to AE, that's your path. I said, and that path is still available to you. That is the expected path. But exactly what you just said, but you may decide that, you know what, you're digging this demand gen thing and then you get a regular paycheck without any of the conflict and you don't have to, pound, 80 calls a day, because maybe that's not your thing, right? Or maybe you don't like rejection. Maybe you like influence instead. Maybe you love wordsmithing. Who the hell knows? So you're going to get exposed to so many more things. The other thing I will tell people who push back on this is, I understand why you push back. I understand why you think it should be in sales. And I'm not going to disagree with you, but I will contend the following. It made more sense in the days when we were all in the office and the SDRs could overhear the AEs on the phone, with their conversations and their objection handling and their technique. It made sense. The pit made sense. But we've all largely moved to work from home. And I understand there's a shift back slightly, but it's never going to go back 100%, at least not for many, 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 many years. So that logic, I think, is gone. I think that logic is gone. The pit is gone. And then even if we do go back, the sales teams, for the most part, are so distributed across the country, across the globe. The historical pit premise is no longer the norm.
Darryl, awesome conversation as always. Where can people find out more about what you're working on? Where would you like to send folks?
You should go to LinkedIn. Of course, you can always just go to my website, darrylpraill.com. The full disclosure picture might be a few years old, might be lacking a beard. I might have hit puberty in that picture. I'm not quite sure, but it still does work. There's some content. There's a forum. You can reach me that way. Follow me on Twitter. Opinionated. OHPINION. The number 8 TED, because occasionally I have an opinion. But LinkedIn by far is the best way to do it. So LinkedIn.com/in/Darryl Praill.
Awesome. We'll include links in the show notes. Again, Darryl, great conversation. If you know of someone who would find value in this conversation, please share it. Let Darryl and I know both via LinkedIn and Twitter, wherever you like to hang out. We like seeing those shares happen. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?